Hi, Year 12. Hope you're well. You've got another lesson that would be with me today. So we are going to go through the first area of study for the religious language unit. Forgot where I was then. So a little introduction to that the other day, which was fantastic. Lots of you have sent me your work, so thank you for doing that. Hopefully that was a bit more of a manageable lesson. I broke it down to 3 small tasks. Today I'm going to be mostly using the pages in this book that I'm scanning and sending to you with this lesson as well. So hopefully you could either print those out and read along, or you can have them somewhere like on your phone and go through them. I'm probably going to read some of it and then I'll direct you to some of it as well to make notes from. And I've got a PowerPoint to go through as well. So let's start with, there's sort of a few things that go with this lesson. I'll just share those with you. Okay, so this is the article called Face to Faith by Mark Vernon, and you should have read that in your lesson the other day. So please make sure you've done that. I can see that some of you have printed out and highlighted it, which is even better because you can keep it then in your folders. But that's a really good introduction to religious language, and actually where we have a problem with talking using religious language. So that's one thing I wanted to show you. Hopefully you've done that reading. Another thing that I'm sending you today is this handout. I would normally print this out and give it to you in class. So it's just a little bit of a summary of some of the stuff that I'm talking about today, and another place where you can find some notes on something called the via negativa, which is another way of saying the apophatic way, and that's what our lesson is on today. And the final sheet that you have with this lesson and the scans of the pages is this sheet that says the apophatic way as a way of understanding God. And this is a evaluation sheet, which is for the end of the lesson. So you're going to find on there arguments for and against using the apophatic way as a way of understanding God. So that's the sheets that you need for your lesson today. And I'm going to go through the PowerPoint now. Okay, so we are on the new unit, which is religious language, and so far you've done a little introduction to what religious language is. And I showed you this kind of problem that we have. If God is transcendent, so outside and above everything, and ineffable, indescribable, then how can we talk meaningfully about God? So some people think that religious language is kind of old religious words like thee and thou and art and those sorts of things. That's one thing that we could think of when we think of religious language. And other people would say religious language is kind of the key terms in religion. So things like the word Eucharist or Messiah or Dharma or shirk. I don't know if you know what all of those mean, but they are kind of words that are only really used in a religious context. So some people might think religious language is referring to words like that, which is also true. But religious language in this unit is really a lot more than that. It's about the philosophical kind of argument about, can we understand what one another are talking about if we're having a discussion or a debate about religion? It's all of the language that we use when we're talking about anything to do with religion or belief or God. And it's really about the problem in communicating these things that are by definition indescribable. So these are, I'm glad we did a kind of interactive lesson last time, because it's really nice to have your ideas from last lesson to use in this lesson. So thank you if you sent those in. These are some of your ideas that you came back to me with when you think about God. These are some of the words that you came up with. A lot of you said things like benevolent or omnipotent, but I've taken those out and we're left with these. And as you can see, some of those are to do with what God might look like in your mind. Some of them are positive, perhaps, and some of them are not. I thought they were really interesting, actually, some of the words that you guys associated with the word God. And in the Bible, and you probably guessed that that's where these came from, in the Bible there are words to describe God that are quite strange, that I wanted us to look at a little bit more. So they are words like Father, King, Warrior. The true vine is one word. Lion of Judah, Mother hen, I think I've mentioned that before, that although we often refer to God as a he, Christians don't believe God is a man. And although God is often given kind of male language, there is female language in there as well. Comforter, Lord, Saviour, living water. So all of those are kind of names for God or ways that God is described in the Bible. And so what I wanted you to do is to take one of those and do a little kind of association word map, mind map thing. And so thank you for sending those in. So here's one from somebody who had the word warrior. And as you can see, there's all sorts of different connotations there, from things like weapons, strength, bravery, protector, to things like pain, war, sacrifice, danger, and words like honor. You know, also symbols like the sword, shield, bow and arrow. I love these leaves here, Amazon warrior. So lots of different connotations with that word warrior. Mother hen, love this cute picture here of a mother hen and her baby chick in this heart shape. So a mother hen obviously is a female image, loving, wise, caring, logical. I like that. Leader, independent, fair, responsible, advisable, intuitive. And that's interesting when you think about mother hen compared to warrior, and how both of those could be words to describe God in the Bible. Comforter, I've broken this one up a bit so you could fit it in. Hug, soothing, compassion, supportive, counselor. Oh, sorry, consoler. And we've also got some Bible verses to go with those, because this person worked out that I was talking about biblical ideas about God. And also friend, mother, sympathizer. So again, perhaps comforter is a word that we also have sort of female connotations for. And then we've got lion. Let me have a look at those. Vine. I love this one because, of course, a vine in the Bible refers to a climbing or trailing woody stemmed plant related to the grapevine. But I love that this person put this in as well, because this is what I associate with the word vine. Vine was an American short form video hosting service where users shared 7-second long looping video clips. I've got a cracker that this person has sent me to show you as well. And there's other associations with it as well. So obviously it's related to wine, and its information gets passed through grapevines. So some of those you can maybe see why God is called the vine or the true vine. We'll have a little break to watch this incredible clip. Okay, you can thank Peaches for this. Thank you, Peaches, for sending this in. This is a vine, and it's a very appropriate one for what we're studying.
I want a church girl that go to church and read her Bible. I want a church girl that go to church and read her Bible. I want a church girl that go to church and read her Bible.
Wow, here we go. I have never seen that before, so that was fun. Thank you, Peaches. Right, where were we? Let's get back into it. Okay, so I think having a look at some of those words that are used in the Bible to describe God is quite useful, because it shows us why it's difficult to talk about God using any language. Why, when two people are having a conversation and you're using words like God is the lion or God is a vine, then they're going to have different ideas in their minds about what that means. So to somebody who has knowledge of how wine is made, or has knowledge about you know, the parts of the world where the Bible was written, where wine was quite a common thing to grow, that is a symbol. It represents being connected to something. You have that idea that it's what wine comes out of. And so there's a symbolism there to do with Jesus and the Last Supper and his death on the cross. There's, you know, an idea about being, connected or strengthened by being together and part of something. And all of those things will maybe add to an understanding of what that person means by God. If to you Vine is that video hosting site, then it doesn't add anything to what you think God is like. And so there's a real importance there in, when we use a word, do we know what the other person means by that word as well? I mean, that's not just to do with religion, is it? You know, that could be any aspect of our life. So for this lesson, there are some key terms that you need, and actually these will take you through the unit. They are on the one of the pages I've scanned to you, which is page 46, so the first page in this chapter. I haven't asked you to include all of them in your notes, because some of them I think you probably know, like agnosticism or truth claim. But the word that we are using today is the apophatic way. It's sometimes called the via negativa. And it's a way of speaking about God and theological ideas using only terms to say what God is not. The cataphatic way is the via positiva, which is sort of the opposite, a range of ways of speaking about God and theological ideas using only terms to say what God is. So can you have a look through those key terms and definitions on page 46 and write them down in your notes, please? Okay, so here's a little introduction to how the via negativa works. Let's see if you can work out what I am describing. It is not solid. You can shout out your answers, but I'm not going to hear you, so that's a shame. It is not a gas. It is not opaque. It is not poisonous. Water. It probably could have been lots of other things as well, but maybe if I'd given you lots more, you would have got to that. So now you have a go. See if you could describe. You could try this with someone at home if you want to, or just by yourself by writing down a series of clues. Could you describe one of these things only by saying what it's not? So you're not allowed to use any positive language about it. You can only say it is not this, it is not that. Have a go. Okay, so the via negativa is also known as the apophatic way, as I've said, and it's a way of talking about God or theological ideas only using words that say what God is not. There are a few philosophers kind of linked to this, but it's not just attributed to one person. The first one, or the earliest one, is someone called Plotinus, who we don't know very much about. We haven't studied him in any other part of the course, and we won't. This is the only time his name appears. And he was around 2nd century CE. We could link the via negativa to Plato's idea of the form of good, that something is so perfect and so pure that it can't actually be described. And it's used by other philosophers. It was used by other philosophers, including someone called Maimonides and Dionysius the Areopagite. So those again are philosophers that we haven't heard of. And this is a really tiny, it's a really small part of philosophy. And so it's got quite minor philosophers as well. So your notes today, these are the kind of areas I want you to organize your notes into. I'm going to ask you to have a few notes on Plotinus, Moses Maimonides and Pseudo-Dionysius. And then at the end, we'll come to strengths and weaknesses as well. Right, on the worksheet that I've sent you, you've got this as well. This is a poem by someone called Gregory of Nazianzus. And he wrote about God: "You are one, you are everything, you are no one, you are not one, you are not everything. Oh, you who bear all names, what shall I call you? You unique and nameable, you surpasser of all." And so what Gregory of Nazianzus is saying is that he wants to talk about God as one and everything, but actually when he tries to use words to talk about God, he realizes God has all the names, and therefore he can't describe him at all. And this is the problem. So here you go. We know that Plotinus was involved in this kind of idea of the via negativa. Again, we don't know very much about him, but at the time he was a major philosopher. He had a philosophy of three principles: the one, the intellect, and the soul. And his teacher was someone called Ammonius Saccas, and he came from the Platonic tradition, so kind of traces his teaching back to Plato. Maimonides was a Jewish philosopher in the 12th century, and he wrote something called the Guide for the Perplexed, explaining humans can know that God exists but not know anything about God. So he had an argument for the existence of God, but said that's as far as we could get, really. We can't know much else about him. And Pseudo-Dionysius is a really interesting person. He's a Christian theologian and philosopher of the late 5th to early 6th century, probably Syrian. And the reason we say probably is because he didn't actually tell us anything about himself that was real. So the author of the set of works commonly referred to as the Corpus Areopagiticum. I'm not pronouncing things correctly, I'm sorry. The author I can't say that word, sorry. He gives himself a pseudonym, and he identifies himself as Dionysius. And Dionysius is a person who was a convert of St. Paul, who's mentioned in Act 17, but historians quite quickly thought that this was not actually his name or who he was. It didn't kind of fit. So that's why he's called Pseudo-Dionysius, fake Dionysius, because that's not who he was. So to find out a bit more about them and how they're involved in the via negativa, could you have a look, please, at pages 48 to 50 in the book and make notes on those three scholars? Thank you. Right, in your reading, you'll have come across this idea. So I just wanted to go through it just in case it didn't make sense, because I think it's really clever. And it's kind of about what is the idea of the via negativa? Why take this approach to it? So imagine you have 10 meters of fence, and I ask you with that 10 meters to make the largest enclosure that you can. Okay, so I'm not very good at these sorts of games because I assume that they need maths, and I'm not very confident with maths. But I would say, okay, there's a few ways of doing this. So there's me, that blue dot, and I will take the fence and I will create a large rectangle, and that is my large enclosure. Or maybe some people would go for a circle. Perhaps you could create a larger kind of area with that. Or perhaps we could be a bit tricky and find a wall that already exists, and maybe we could do something where we stretch out, you know, the fence so that we only have to make two sides in order to make a larger enclosure. But the trick is to this game that there's a different way of thinking about it. And the way of doing that is this, to say, here I am, and I will create the smallest shape that I possibly can. And I will say that I am on the outside of the fence. So I have created a large enclosure because everything on the other side of the fence is in my enclosure. Does that make sense? So what's that got to do with God and the via negativa? Well, if I try and use the same kind of pictures, so there's me and this is God. And through philosophy or theology or religious experience, whatever it is, I say, okay, and now I'm going to create a perimeter that says this is all the stuff I know about God. And people, of course, putting God in a box. So there's God, and these are the things that I understand about God, and now I can kind of look at God and study God and understand God. But what we do if we're doing it from a via negativa perspective is that we are inside of that box and God is outside of it. And we say, okay, so actually here I am, and this is my understanding of God, but I'm going to put God on the outside of that and say that what I understand about God is very little. and actually I can only know what God isn't. I can't actually know what God is. And so to use the via negativa is to use words that are negative words. I don't mean negative as in bad, but that are things like immortal, invisible, timeless, unchanging. So the things that we know that God isn't. So God is not mortal, God is not visible, those sorts of things. So why don't you have a go and see if you can think of any others? Okay, here's a task that I'd like to have a go at now, is attempt to write a description of God in negative statements. Do you think it works? There is a link to Buddhism here. Now, Buddhists don't believe in God, but it doesn't mean that they can't use the via negativa, because in Buddhism, as you'll find out next year, when we try to understand concepts like nirvana, the nature of the Buddha, it's actually impossible to describe them in human language. And so Buddhists might also do that. They'll describe those concepts only using words that those things are not. Just going to let you read through these benefits. And for your final task, please, I'd like you to use that evaluation sheet. So you could print it out and then colour it in two colours, one that says things that are good about using the via negativa and one that says it is not useful. Up to you, or you could read it and kind of make a table and write them down into two columns. Okay, any questions, email me, and please email the work back to me by the end of the week. Thanks very much. Bye.